Walking back like that. I'm live.
We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you almost jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single time. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. What many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
The very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean B. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofadostv@gmail.com. Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the Central. Good evening in the Mountain. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Hi, Corey Lorenz. Hi, Brian Johnson. And for those of you who have yet to chat where you are dialing in from and who you are,
Welcome to the live. It's Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective, bringing you those ADOT's hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering. And today, family, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. Yes, family, it's getting kind of hectic. Derek Chauvin's attorney files motion for trial on multiple grounds, including jury misconduct, family. We're going to get right into it at the close of the intro music, which is about to be done in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, Lord, they just won't let this man get sentenced. We can't just get this man, this wigger in jail. We can't win. Jury misconduct. Somebody lied, y'all, and said they had no clue about what was going on with the George Floyd protest. Come to find out, he done spilled the beans on an interview that says he was all up in the mix. Oh my God, family. Now I've already gone over with y'all the 16-pager that was required to rule all of us who had any participation in trying to get justice for Mr. Floyd. I've shared that with y'all, right? And so that was a 16-page questionnaire. It was out of control. Now, it was a lot. So I don't know what possessed this brother. I pray it's made up. I pray it's made up, but for some reason, I don't think it is. Let's get into this article, family. Derek Chauvin's attorney files motion for new trial on multiple grounds, including jury misconduct. They don't want this white inferior race soldier and glacier donkey to do any time in jail. It is clear that they are going to try everything to declare this thing a mistrial. Family, we ain't there yet. We cannot celebrate until this man gets 40 years. So we got to really lean in on the prayers. Okay, Derek Chauvin's attorney has filed a motion in Hennepin County, Minnesota, requesting a new trial for the disgraced former Minneapolis police officer, citing jury misconduct and other factors. On April 20th, Chauvin was found guilty, we already know that, of second-degree unintentional murder. It was first-degree murder. Third-degree murder and second-degrry manslaughter in the death of Mr. George Floyd. Floyd died after Chauvin kneeled on his body while he was handcuffed and prone for more than 9 minutes, 9 minutes, 29 seconds to be exact, on May 25th. The motion, which was filed Tuesday by Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, alleged that he didn't get a fair trial due to high-profile publicity in the case. There's no place on planet Earth that he would have gotten a fair trial if that's the standard. that the trial not be high profile with a bunch of publicity. That is retarded. The motion alleged that Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill abused his discretion by ruling not to move the trial or sequester the jury for the duration of the trial. Once again, there is no place on the globe that moving the trial was going to safeguard the jurors. There's no place in this country you could have gone that people did not know about this very public issue here, with the race soldier's knee on Mr. George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Where could you have gone? As for sequestering the jury, what for? What for? By the time it was time to render a verdict, I mean, all the evidence showed this man was clearly guilty. And the hoops that the prosecution had to jump through just to prove it. And all the made-up stories on Nelson's side. Oh, my God. Seriously. He was trying a case on a bunch of what-ifs. And like, we used to say back in the Gap, if ifs was fifths, we'd all be drunk up in here. Right? And that's the way Nelson was trying that case, on a bunch of what-ifs. When we had factual evidence of videos, 360 degrees of them. Oh, my God. Nelson alleged Cahill's denial of granting a new trial after learning that a defense witness was intimidated was also improper. A defense witness was intimidated. I don't remember that. The motion also alleged prosecutorial misconduct, claiming that the state attorneys disparaged the defense in their closing argument and failed to properly prepare witnesses ahead of their testimony. Okay, see, none of this is going to fly. But this juror is a problem. If he lied, family, Nelson's motion also requests a hearing to impeach the verdict of the jury on the grounds that the jury committed misconduct, felt threatened or intimidated, felt race-baited, or failed to adhere to jury instructions. That's not going to fly. A photo surfaced this week showing a juror in the state murder trial had attended a DC protest last year with a shirt saying, "Get your knee off our necks," in reference to Floyd's death. That's where we're going to have the problem. Chauvin, who faces up to 40 years in prison, is scheduled to be sentenced on June 25th. The federal government is also reportedly seeking civil rights charges against him and the 3 other officers who were on the scene of Floyd's death. Now let's talk about how this might be a problem, family. The last part, all the rest of that ain't gonna fly. The judge has already ruled. He's not. It won't be declared a mistrial for that, okay? But let's talk about this juror who said he wasn't there when he responded. Hold on, y'all. Let me pull it up. This is where we may listen, I don't want to speak none of that into existence, but you can't lie on these things. If it's found out or he ends up telling on himself, which is what happened. Jesus, I got to go back and pull the article again. I don't see it. Hold on, family. Okay, hold on. Where is that one where the juror? Hold on, family. Just give me a second. I got to pull it up again. Oh, this is what happens when you have too many windows open. This is where it may be a problem, family. This might be a serious problem. Where is the article? Okay, hold on. Okay. Let's get into it. Chauvin juror participated in Black Lives Matter protests, lied about it. Oh my God. Let's read it. Derek Chauvin juror lied about protests. Cops' hope of appeal boosted after picture emerges of juror at Black Lives Matter rally wearing "Get Your Knee Off Our Necks" t-shirt, despite telling the court he'd never been on a march. Brandon Mitchell was one of 12 jurors who convicted Minneapolis cop Derek Chauvin of the second-degree murder of George Floyd last month. Mitchell, a 31-year-old Black man, was photographed on social media attending on August 28 protests in Washington, D.C., at which Floyd's relatives spoke. Mitchell is seen in a photograph wearing a t-shirt with a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. and the words "Get your knee off our necks" and BLM. He is also wearing a baseball cap embossed with Black Lives Matter. Mitchell acknowledged being at the event and that his uncle posted the photo, but claims he doesn't recall wearing or owning the shirt or cap. Mitchell said he answered no to 2 questions about demonstrations on the questionnaire sent out before jury selection. Legal experts say the revelation will likely be brought up on appeal by Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, who will argue his client was denied impartial jury. Questions have been raised about the impartiality of one of the 12 jurors who convicted Derek Chauvin of murder after it was revealed he attended a rally last summer where George Floyd's relatives addressed the crowd. A photo posted on social media shows Brandon Mitchell attending the August 28th event in D.C. to commemorate Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech during the 63 March on Washington. It shows Mitchell, a high school basketball coach, standing with two other men and wearing a t-shirt with the picture of King and the words, "Get your knee off our necks," and "Black Lives Matter." He is also wearing a baseball cap printed with "Black Lives Matter." Mitchell has admitted the photo is of him from that date, but defended attending the rally, claiming it was not explicitly a protest against police or a commemoration for George Floyd. That is, despite the fact that Floyd's brother and sister, Philonise and Bridget Floyd, and relatives of other African Americans who had been shot by police addressed the crowd that day. Mitchell said he answered no to 2 questions about demonstrations on the questionnaire sent out before jury selection. Experts say the revelation could be grounds for the cops' appeal. And there he is. It's a slippery slope, family. It is a slippery slope. Mitchell 31 acknowledged being at the event that his uncle posted the photo, but said he doesn't recall wearing or owning the shirt. Okay. He was the first juror to go public. Why? Spoke to several media outlets last week, including the Associated Press. "I'd never been to D.C., Mitchell said of his reasons for attending the event. The opportunity to go to D.C., the opportunity to be around thousands and thousands of Black people. I just thought it was a good opportunity to be a part of something." Mike Brandt, a Minneapolis defense attorney not involved in the case, told the AP the revelation alone wasn't nearly enough to overturn Chauvin's conviction, but it could be combined with other issues. The announcement of a massive civil settlement to Floyd's family during jury selection, the shooting of Daunte Wright, the judge's refusal to move the trial in an appeal to say Chauvin was denied a fair trial. Ted Samsel Jones, a professor at the Mitchell Hamline School of Law, told the AP that the photo of Mitchell was evidence that Chauvin can point to in order to establish that his right to an impartial jury was denied. Oh my God. Fix it, Black Jesus. He added, speaking frankly, Chauvin did not have a fully impartial jury in the sense we usually give criminal defendants. That wasn't the fault of the judge or the prosecutors. It was simply a function of the incredible publicity and public pressure surrounding the trial. Mitchell said he answered no to 2 questions about demonstrations. The first question asked, did you or someone close to you participate in any of the demonstrations or marches against police brutality that took place in Minneapolis after George Floyd's death? I say no is appropriate to that question. The second asked, other than what you have already described above, have you or anyone close to you participated in protests about police use of force or police brutality? This is where we're going to get tripped up, family. You know they hold us to the letter of every law. The laws are really for us, not for them. If this was reversed and a Black man had kneed on George Floyd's, on Chauvin's neck, if George Floyd was the cop and had kneed on Chauvin's neck for 9 minutes, 29 seconds, this would be of no issue. They would have thrown the book at him and gave him the maximum sentences on all 3 charges to be sustained continuous on a continuum. You understand what I'm telling you? But when it's us, every T must be crossed and every I must be dotted, family. This is not good. That second question might be grounds for a mistrial or for an appeal. Mitchell told Nelson during jury selection that he had a very favorable opinion of Black Lives Matter. that he knew some police officers at his gym who are great guys, and that he felt neutral about Blue Lives Matter, a pro-police group. That sounds good. A jury took just 10.5 hours to find former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin unanimously guilty of murder and manslaughter charges in the death of George Floyd. But with Chauvin, 45, almost certain to appeal, the politically explosive case could be far from over. With 9 out of every 10 appeals refused by U.S. courts, defense attorney Eric Nelson will face an uphill task. But here, DailyMail.com analyzes the key issues the disgraced ex-cop and his legal team will seize upon as grounds for a retrial. Too close to home, George Floyd's shocking death under the knee of Derek Chauvin triggered months of protests across the globe. But nowhere was the pain and anguish felt more acutely than in his native Minneapolis, where crowds greeted today's verdict with roars of approval and tears of joy. Excuse me? Why should they be entitled to a change of venue? Aren't you supposed to be tried by a jury of your peers? If you executed Mr. Floyd in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, why should you be able to move? Why should you be able to move and be tried someplace else? Because you're hoping to connect with racists like yourself. You're hoping to connect with domestic terrorists and put them on that trial, in that jury box. You don't want to be tried by a jury of your peers who have been under your boot, literally and figuratively, forever. Forever. You don't want to be tried by them because they're absolutely going to find you guilty. Not that all the evidence doesn't point to your guilt of having executed Mr. Floyd. But how dare you? This shouldn't even be allowed. And thank you, Judge Cahill, for not allowing it. The ex-cop's legal team had argued there was no way their client could get a fair trial in Hennepin County, but District Judge Peter Cahill refused to move it to another city. Was Mr. Floyd given fair treatment? How y'all glacier donkeys want all the fairness to swing your direction? But Mr. Floyd doesn't get to live. He doesn't get to speak in his own defense. Nothing. Where is the fake $20 bill? Was it ever found to be fake? Furthermore, why did he deserve to lose his life? Was there anything fair about Chauvin's knee on his neck for 9 minutes, 29 seconds with the help and support of the other race soldiers that are soon to be tried this summer? Was there fairness in that? Is there fairness in any of our executions by the race soldiers who are unarmed? Is there any fairness in any of it? I would venture to say no. Back to the text. Cahill said the chaos and anger surrounding Chauvin would follow the defendant wherever he went. As far as a change of venue, I don't think that would give the defendant any kind of a fair trial beyond what we are doing here today, Cahill said last month. I don't think there's any place in the state of Minnesota that has not been subjected to an extreme amount of publicity in this case. Likewise, Cahill refused to delay proceedings, given how unlikely anyone could forget the names of those involved or harrowing video of Floyd's last moments. Quote, unfortunately, I think the pre-trial publicity in this case will continue no matter how long we continue it, Cahill said. Defense attorney Eric Nelson will nonetheless argue that nobody can receive a fair trial under these circumstances. Another shooting, fresh outrage. Judge Cahill refused repeated defense requests to sequester the jury during the 3-week trial to shield them from any mention of the case or related news. But nobody could have anticipated what happened next. We could. Is it shocking to any of you that there was another execution in Minnesota while the Chauvin trial? Were you shocked? 181 Black people have been executed since George Floyd by the race soldiers. This doesn't surprise us. As a matter of fact, this show is born to keep this alive because I'm concerned that we're becoming too desensitized by all of it. They're executing 3 of us a day on the average. Okay, a horrifying police shooting of an unarmed Black motorist just 10 miles from the spot where Floyd choked to death. He didn't choke to death. The race soldier executed him with his knee. killing of Dante Wright, 20, by a police officer who claimed she mistook her firearm for a taser when she blasted him. Years and don't know the difference between a taser and a gun. You don't know the difference between when you're cocking a gun. It's a very different thing than when you firing off a very light taser as compared to the weight of a gun and the things you have to do to get the gun ready to shoot. You can scream taser, taser, taser all you want to try to hide the fact that you're teaching the rookie how to get away with murder. That's what you did. That's what Chauvin was doing. He was shocked to be convicted on all 3 accounts. He was in utter and complete shock and disbelief. Because that's what they're hired to do. They hire the domestic terrorists and put them in our communities to execute us, to make space for gentrification. There seems little doubt that jurors heard about it. One lives in Brooklyn Park, the neighborhood where the disturbing incident unfolded on April 11th. Another has relatives living there. Nelson told the court he was worried fresh civil unrest and the specter of a defenseless young black male losing his life in what appeared a routine traffic stop could evoke painful memories for jurors. But they had the evidence that showed Chauvin executed Floyd. Even with this execution, it doesn't change the fact that Chauvin executing Floyd was on everybody's video reel. He told the court, I understand it does not involve these same parties. But the problem is the emotional response that case creates sets the stage for a jury to say, I'm not going to vote not guilty because I'm concerned about the outcome. If ifs was fifths, we'd all be drunk up in this piece. So the jury can't look at the evidence of the Glacier Donkey Chauvin. You can't look at that evidence and determine guilty on all 3 charges without factoring in this. Make it make sense. Nelson implored the judge once again to sequester the jury and ask him to remind them at the beginning and end of each day to ignore the media. I'm being animated. Cahill decided ultimately that sequestering the jury could bring even more attention to the Brooklyn Center tragedy. He told the court, I think sequestration will only aggravate that. Oh, I heard about the civil unrest, and now the judge is putting us in sequestration. There must be a greater threat to our security. Everybody ifing. What is for everybody? What is for everybody? Okay? I think the better way is to continue with the trial as we've been going. Enter Maxine Waters. Oh, they are trying to blame his conviction on the rain, not the evidence that the world has seen. In the 11 months since he died, face down the street, handcuffed, gasping for air and begging for mercy, Mr. Floyd's family have not wavered in their calls for a restraint, calm, and peaceful protest. But it seemed Firebrand California Representative Maxine Waters had not read the script when she flew into Minneapolis on the eve of jury deliberations to rally protesters and demand justice. Quote, we're looking for a guilty verdict, and if we don't, we cannot go away. We've got to get more confrontational, she urged crowds Sunday night. As jurors began deliberating the very next day, Republicans condemned the veteran Congresswoman's call to arms as incitement to a riot and jury tampering. Oh my God, they are really reaching. They really want to protect this Glacier Donkey. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what it takes for us to get a conviction on all 3 accounts. And it's unbelievable. The dog and pony show that's going on right now. Judge Cahill was equally unimpressed, describing Waters' remarks as abhorrent. Because you see, the KKK is also on the bench. It's also in the government. He denied Chauvin a retrial, but told his attorney, I grant you, Congresswoman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned. Now the man sits up here and we can see him in a t-shirt with a big old Kool-Aid grin, you know, at a Black Lives Matter rally in D.C. after saying no to question number 2. Nelson will argue that he repeatedly asked for the jury to be sequestered and that had the judge agreed, they would have never been exposed to Waters' incendiary demands. He will also point out that they could have seen reports of how vandals dumped the severed pig's head out. Oh, that must have been what happened to one of the witnesses. He will also point out that they could have seen reports of how vandals dumped the severed pig's head outside a Californian house, mistakenly believing it was a home of the defense's use of force expert Barry Broad. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh, Waters was one of numerous politicians, including President Joe Biden, who waded into the explosive trial even as jurors deliberated. Hours before the verdict, Biden told reporters he was praying for the right verdict. His words would not have reached jurors because they were finally sequestered on Monday. Praying for the right verdict. Did he say what was right? Oh, they are trying to save Chauvin. It's too late, y'all. Hours before the verdict, Biden told reporters he was praying for the right verdict. Okay, jumping down. However, Nelson will argue the judge's instructions. He simply told jurors towards the end of the trial, don't watch the news, were completely inadequate. Oh my God. Payoff threatens case. The Floyds received the justice they craved. They will also receive a massive amount of money. 5 days after jury selection began, the city of Minneapolis made the extraordinary decision to announce to the world that they had approved a $27 million settlement in the civil case brought by the family. Nelson immediately asked for the trial to be moved and postponed, but his request fell on deaf ears. Like the world doesn't know they got $27 million. I don't get it. Instead, it was agreed that the judge would voir dire the jurors already seated. 2 were dismissed as a result, having admitted that they had heard about the settlement and it left them unable to be impartial. Oh my God. The timing of the announcement clearly enraged Judge Cahill, prompting an outburst from the bench in which he ordered both the state and defense, just stop talking about it. This is circus as they are trying to protect this white man who took the life of Mr. George Floyd. I cannot believe. Juror lies about protests. Juror Brandon Mitchell, back to that story. I'm not going to read that again. This is a zoo. Let's read it because there's some juicy stuff in here that I didn't expose. Okay, Juror Brandon Mitchell attended an August 28 event to commemorate. Okay, jump down. It shows Mitchell, a high school vet, standing with 2 other men and wearing a T-shirt. Okay, jump down. Okay, jump down. The first, did you or someone close to you? Okay, that second question. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't think. Oh, let's pray, y'all, because I don't know. Let me keep reading to see what little tidbits we left out. Okay, let's jump down. He also said he had watched clips of bystander video of Floyd being pinned and had wondered why 3 other officers at the scene didn't intervene. He said he could be neutral at trial. Mitchell told the Star Tribune that last summer's protest was 100% not a march for Floyd. It was directly related to MLK's March on Washington from the 60s. The date of the March on Washington is the date. It was literally called the anniversary of the March on Washington, he said. He said the jury selection process, I think I was being extremely honest for sure. I gave my views on everything on the case on Black Lives Matter. Okay. And then they give you the text. We already did the show on these 16 pages. Welcome to the live, everybody. I'm going to jump to my next story. I'll be over to play with y'all after I finish all of the puckery. So Derek, okay, that's done. Hold on. Let me close that out. Let me close that one out. I did that one. Let's move on because the prosecutors are having a hard time. They want a much stiffer sentence than what they believe is going to come down the stretch. So let's get into that one. Prosecutors seek tougher sentence for Derek Chauvin and George Floyd's. Uh-oh, what happened to this? Uh-oh. Hold on, let me go back. It jumped. Prosecutors seek tougher sentence for Derek Chauvin and George Floyd's execution. They said death. Execution is my word. DA Eric Nelson is opposing a tougher sentence, saying the state has failed to prove that those aggravating factors, among others, existed when Chauvin arrested Floyd on May 25th. OMG. Now, you know Amber Geiger is working on an appeal. Her sentence was only 10 years. Probably because the family was full of forgiveness and passing around hugs like M&Ms. And the judge even got in on the act. The very black, mammy judge jumped off the bench to go give Amber Geiger, the executioner of Botham Jean, a hug. And so now she's appealing the 10 years. She wants out of jail. They can do the murders, but they can't do the time. This is May 1st, 2021. Prosecutors are asking a judge to give Derek Chauvin a more severe penalty than state guidelines call for when he is sentenced in June for Mr. Floyd's death, arguing in court documents filed Friday that Floyd was particularly vulnerable and that Chauvin abused his authority as a police officer. But Eric Nelson is opposing a tougher sentence, saying the state has failed to prove that those aggravating factors, among others, existed when Chauvin arrested Floyd on May 25th. This is a Jedi mind trick. Chauvin, who is white, was convicted last week of second degree. Okay, we already know that part. Let's read it anyway. Of second degree unintentional murder, third degree murder, and second degree manslaughter for pressing his knee against Mr. Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes, as the black man said he couldn't, as Mr. Floyd said, he couldn't breathe and went motionless. Even though he was found guilty of all 3 counts under Minnesota statutes, he'll only be sentenced on the most serious one, second degree murder. While that count carries a maximum sentence of 40 years, experts say he won't get that much. This kind of stuff makes me sick. Prosecutors did not specify how much time they would seek for Chauvin. He deserves the maximum. He deserves concurrent, the maximum for each charge. Would that not have happened to me or you? Would that not have happened to Mr. Floyd if he was a race soldier? If he was black, kneeling on the knee of Chauvin? Would he have not gotten those sentences? Concurrent, max. Under Minnesota sentencing guidelines, a presumptive sentence for second-degree unintentional murder for someone with no criminal record like Chauvin would be 12.5 years. Me speaking, I've shared with you guys in prior archives that this was the 9th and effective blood choke. Chauvin had 8 other attempts that the Minneapolis Police Department decided were reasonable. Cahill would only let them use 2 of the weakest of the 8, which is why I guess they opted not to use them at all. They were too weak. The stronger of the 8, 6 of them were complaints about Chauvin choking the constituents, choking them. He was practicing the blood choke all along, and the MPD, who came through this time, said that that was reasonable. And this is why it's problematic. Because if he had been convicted of the other 6 or 8, he would have had a criminal record. Now, mind you, they do these things and go back to work. They do these things to us and go back to work. They get paid time off until these things run its course in the system, only to be told that what they're doing to us is reasonable. Back to the text. Judges can sentence someone to as little as 10 years and 8 months or as much as 15 years and still be within the advisory guideline range. To go above that, Judge Peter Cahill would have to find that there were aggravating factors. And even if those are found, legal experts have said Chauvin would likely not face more than 30 years. How soon will he be paroled? In legal briefs filed Friday, prosecutors said Chauvin should be sentenced above the guideline range because Floyd was particularly vulnerable with his hands cupped behind his back as he was face down on the ground and that he was intoxicated. They noted that Chauvin held his position even after Floyd became unresponsive and officers knew he had no pulse. They all but said so on video. Prosecutors also said Chauvin treated Floyd with particular cruelty during the lengthy restraint, saying Chauvin inflicted gratuitous pain and caused psychological distress to Floyd and to the bystanders. All true. So, defendant continued to maintain his position atop Mr. Floyd, even as Mr. Floyd cried out that he was in pain. Even as Mr. Floyd exclaimed 27 times he could not breathe. And even as Mr. Floyd said that defendant's actions were killing him. Prosecutors wrote. They added that he stayed in position as Floyd cried out for his mother, stopped speaking, and lost consciousness. Defendant thus did not just inflict physical pain. He caused Mr. Floyd psychological distress during the final moments of his life, leaving Mr. Floyd helpless as he squeezed the last vestiges of life out of Mr. Floyd's body, prosecutors wrote. They also said that Chauvin abused his position of authority as a police officer, committed his crime as part of a group of 3 or more people, and that he pinned Floyd down in the presence of children, including a 9-year-old girl who testified at trial that watching the restraint made her sad and kind of mad. Nelson disagreed, writing that Mr. Chauvin entered into the officer's encounter with Mr. Floyd with legal authority to assist in effecting the lawful arrest of an actively resisting criminal suspect. Mr. Chauvin was authorized under Minnesota law to use reasonable force to do so. There was nothing about the force he used that was reasonable. That's why he's convicted on all 3 accounts. Nelson said Floyd was not particularly vulnerable, saying he was a large man. You see, super nigger. Saying he was a large man who was struggling with officers. He wrote that courts have typically found particular vulnerability if the victims are young or perhaps sleeping when a crime occurs. Nelson also said Floyd was not treated with particular cruelty, saying that there is no evidence that the assault perpetrated by Chauvin involved gratuitous pain. That's not usually associated with second-degree murder. Excuse me? So a knee on your neck, a knee in the back, and pressure in the hand. All beyond the time he's expired and has no pulse. It's not cruel. That's not gratuitous pain. As he he dug in deeper, like he was getting aroused by the disdain and disgust espoused by the bystanders. Nelson also said Floyd was not treated. Okay. The assault of Mr. Floyd occurred in the course of a very short time, involved no threats or taunting, such as putting a gun to his head and pulling the trigger, and ended when EMS finally responded to officers' calls, Nelson wrote. It took the paramedics to uninvite Chauvin's knees up off of Mr. Floyd's neck before he would let it go. He also said the state hasn't proven that any of the other officers actively participated in the crime for which Chauvin was convicted. Did they stop it? Then they're guilty. One pinned his legs down, another one was in his back, and the other one was on the curb pushing the bystanders back. Two towel. They're all guilty. He also wrote, those officers are scheduled to face trial on aiding and abetting charges in August. If I drive the car and my people in my car, my passengers rob the bank, don't I do turn? Aren't I guilty by association? He also wrote that the presence of children in this case is different from cases in which children might be witnessing a crime in a home and unable to leave. It took the children to tape this for us to get the guilty conviction. They were the real heroes and sheroes. Everybody out there was. The children absolutely need to be there. They were placed there by divine intervention. Everybody who was there was placed there by divine intervention. From the MMA expert to the paramedic from the fire department, to the children, to the teens, to the old people, they were all there by divine assignment. They were the angels and the real heroes and sheroes. They couldn't leave. And he said the state failed to prove that Chauvin's role as a police officer was an aggravating factor, saying that Floyd's struggle with officers showed that Chauvin's authority was irrelevant to Floyd. So Floyd fighting for his life is seen as him struggling with Chauvin and his authority. Not Chauvin abusing his authority. All money ain't good money. There's work at the post office, Hollywood Shuffle. Nelson should watch that. Cahill has said he will review the attorney's written arguments before determining whether aggravating factors exist that will warrant a tougher sentence. No matter what sentence Chauvin gets in Minnesota, it's presumed that a defendant with good behavior will serve 2/3 of the penalty in prison and the rest on supervised release, commonly known as parole. Good golly, Miss Molly. Let me see how y'all doing. Hi. Oh, good Lord. Brian says he should have kept his mouth closed, him and Maxine Waters, although she said nothing inflammatory. The white supremacist system is going to use this as fuel for the appeal, retrial. Of course they are. Corey says Maxine Waters should definitely have chilled out. Everything in the system of white supremacy is weaponized against us. It's true. But I'm sure she's watching it and getting as emotional as we are. Satch Ohio, thank you for joining the live, says he should be indicted on federal charges. Absolutely. Any race soldier who executes an unarmed black woman, man, or child should be prosecuted at the federal level. If you are unarmed and get murdered by the race soldiers, this is why I say they're not doing much with this George Floyd thing. We're going to go over it in a second. It doesn't matter with this George Floyd Act. It doesn't do anything real to reform what's going on. They don't get to the problem, which is the fact that you're more concerned about violating the First Amendment rights of domestic terrorists to serve on the police force than you are Black lives. Let's keep it a buck. Brian says, and then to have to re-question all those witnesses. Whoo, I can't imagine it. Hi, Erie Blackfire. I'm late, but I made it. Welcome to the live, my love. No one can possibly look at that video recording of Chauvin's killing Floyd and not have some visceral reaction. These aren't robots judging on this. Thank you, Brian. Herb Saint, Biden was praying. But what for as Strom Thurmond's boy? What for as a man who has neglected us for the first 100 days with no end in sight of the neglect? Because him and KAMALA already told us they're not doing anything specifically for us, and 87% of our electorate thought it was better to replace the racists in office of 4 years with no record against ADOCs, with racists in office a combined 65 years, with records against ADOCs several New York City blocks long. Brian, in order for them, the jury, to not watch the news, the court would literally have had to put them in jail and take away their phones. You're so right. The judge in Geiger's case came down from her seat and gave her both a hug and a Bible. The other officers in the court joined in on the pity party. Should they not have remained neutral? Girl, bye. Exactly. Oh my God. Y'all keep me laughing. Smickelson, thin blue line is an insult to veterans. They wrong the same ANG veterans. They want to come protect them. They use canines to threaten ANG veterans while they are handcuffed. I don't know what that means, Smickelson. Please unpack that. I don't know those acronyms. He says, puck the thin blue line. Ooh-ah. No one should wear a flag that is black and gray unless you serve the USA at a time of war. In the war setting, cops wearing it is a fucking insult to all veterans of war. I don't know what any of that means, Smickelson. You're gonna, are you in the right show? I don't know. Biden's prayer probably didn't get higher than the ceiling. Brian, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So let's go next. Okay. I got about 20 minutes. Let me get through some of this other stuff up here. I got so many windows open. I got to close some of it out. Okay, so let me close that one out. Did that one. Let's talk about the Columbus mayor requests federal investigation of police force after Ma'Khia Bryant shooting, plus other deaths. You know, I got to do this because the Biden administration, along with Uncle Tim, says America's not a racist country. So your anti-black racism segment is to deal with all the puckery and all the racism against American descendants of chattel slavery, whose ancestors built all the wealth that they eat from. And this is what happens when you lie and you whitewash the history books. You begin to believe your own lies. So I got to keep the spotlight on it, since Biden chose to protect Asians as we continue to be executed by the race soldiers. With that said, I thank you for all your contributions to my work. Let me wave the banner. Thank you for helping me to educate the masses and to advocate for ADOCs. I greatly appreciate it, your support. So let's go back. Every time Lord, where am I? Give me a second to get back to the article. Okay. Attorney for Bryant's family also wants probe into handling of 16-year-old's foster care placement. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. They should be under the jail. That mother, from my understanding, called those grown-ass ex-foster kids, grown women, to come over there and to punk Ma'Khia and to harass her over some dishes. There were several complaints about that foster parent. Kids running away, all manner of abuses. These kids were complaining to the social services system that they wanted out of there. Okay? Let me see if I can find that article. Complaints against foster mother of Ma'Khia Bryant. Let's talk about it. Juvenile, let's talk about this and I'll go back to that. Good Lord. Oh, I can't stand it. Every time I want to read an article, they want subscriptions. Let's go to the Griot, see if they'll let me read it. Let's talk about it. The foster care system and others failed Ma'Khia Bryant and black kids like her. This is what our kids are undergoing. They're in a virtual hell in the social services system. They all need to go to jail. Dr. Staten's opinion, Dr. Stacey Patton, who recounts her personal experiences in the foster care system, says 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant deserves to be humanized beyond her tragic police-involved death. This is what our kids are going through. There's no place in this world for black children. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote these words in 1904 to convey the mean-spiritedness of mainstream life to the first generation of black children growing up in the decades after slavery. His words still ring true today as the nation continues to deal with serial state violence against black adults and children. As much of the mainstream press heralded the guilty verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, calling it a watershed moment or declaring it to be a sign that the blue wall of silence is eroding and racial progress is on the horizon, Black America is still processing the police killings of 4 young people over the past few weeks. Dante Wright, 20, Adam Toledo, 13, Anthony Thompson Jr., a middle initial J, 17, and Ma'Khia Bryant, 16. Research shows that black children are 6 times more likely to be shot to death by police than their white peers, and 93% of these killings are boys. Didn't I tell y'all they trying to ethnically cleanse us up at this feast? Every one of these shootings has a different story behind them. It is easy to blame the police officers, to villainize the young victims, and to cast them as the architects of their own death. What's not so easy is for us to be brave enough to have difficult and honest conversations about who these young people were, how we got to these tragic incidents, the root causes of violence in our culture, and how we could have changed these stories. Let's talk about the latest victim, Ma'Khia Bryant. If we believe the police and the press accounts and chatter on social media, this honor roll student was some crazy girl lunging at 2 people with a knife and got shot 4 times in her chest. I'm sorry, guys. These, the ghetto. The article jumped. Just give me a second. On its own. If we believe the police and press accounts and chatter on social media, this honor roll student was some crazy girl lunging at 2 people with a knife and got shot 4 times in her chest for it by a cop who had to make a split-second decision. Folks have been debating whether the cop should have used a taser instead of his gun. They've asked why he didn't shoot her in the leg or arm. Why did he have to shoot her 4 times? Why didn't she stay in the house after she called the police to report that she was being attacked by 2 women? Why didn't she drop the knife once the police arrived? Why did the officer try to de-escalate? How could he shoot a child? But this is not the whole story. Bryant deserves some kind of understanding and humanizing, and her killing needs context. Ma'Khia Bryant's aunt and mother gave tearful interviews where they expressed their love for her, but we still don't have concrete details that provide a full picture of the chain of events that led up to her death. We mostly have a lot of conjecture. We do know that she was in foster care, but we don't know why. And there are allegations that Bryant's foster mother called two women to come to her home to beat her up over dishes, over the cleanliness of the house. What kind of dysfunction was happening in that foster home that turned into a street fight, that turned into Bryant being shot by the police? Why was this child defending herself against grown women? Why aren't we analyzing why this teenager had to make a split-second decision to save her own life only to have it taken away? Bryant has her own personal narrative that we may never learn about. But I am writing in defense of her because I know firsthand how traumatizing the American foster care system can be. And the fact that she was a ward of the state has everything to do with her death. I am case number KC 114343 from New Jersey's child welfare system. I spent most of my Black girlhood in foster care until I aged out in the late 1990s. I can tell you that I understand why Ma'Khia Bryant picked up that knife on that fateful afternoon when she was killed. I say executed. Here was a stressed out teenager. We don't know exactly why she and her sister were placed in foster care, but the siblings were in placement because their family of origin was likely going through some kind of crisis. They may have been removed from their parents because they were unsafe, experiencing physical or sexual abuse or neglect, or their parents were unable to care for them. Sure, her mother told the press that she loves her daughters and we're trying to get them back. My adoptive mother, who beat the hell out of me with extension cords and other weapons, said the same thing. The very act of being placed in foster care adds additional trauma because it means the loss of all that is familiar to a child. It is disruptive, unpredictable, and sometimes re-traumatizing depending on the type of home or facility where the child is placed. America's foster care system, which is home to more than 400,000 young people on any given day, can be life-saving as it was for me. And a heartless bureaucracy and punitive racialized system that churns out the walking wounded. Black children are overrepresented. This is what happened to DMX. Black children are overrepresented in the foster care system, which tends to disproportionately monitor, regulate, and punish poor Black families. The predominantly white and female workforce often lacks cultural competency skills and far too often re-traumatizes children of color who suffer negative outcomes. It is a war zone for our children, whose ancestors built all the wealth in this country with their lives. According to federal data, Black children are placed into foster care at twice the rate for white children. They are more likely to be placed into foster care than receive in-home services, even when they have the same problems as white children. Black children stay in foster care longer, receive fewer services, are more likely to be given psychotropic medications to control their behaviors, and increasing numbers are being funneled through the foster care to prison pipeline. So we got the preschool to prison pipeline, and we've got the foster care to prison pipeline. This is not a system that is designed to heal, empower, or prepare children to become healthy, thriving, and productive adults. When Black families and communities fail their children, they are placed at risk for an entire ecosystem of negative outcomes. For example, the National Coalition for Child Protection Reform has reported that foster care is generally unsafe for children. The NCCPR has found that cases of sexual abuse in foster care are more than 4 times higher than the rate in the general population. And in group homes, there was more than 10 times the rate of physical abuse and more than 28 times the rate of sexual abuse as in the general population. 1/3 of foster children reported being abused by a foster parent. Some foster children return home, some get adopted, and far too many age out and then struggle badly with more than 1 in 5 becoming homeless after the age of 18. DMX talked about this, how his mother put him in the system because she claimed she couldn't control him. When he got of age and came out the system, she wouldn't let him back in the house. Instead of making a successful transition into productive adulthood, many former foster youth suffer from emotional problems and chronic health conditions. Less than half graduate from high school by the time they leave the system. Half of youth use illegal drugs, fewer than 3% own a college degree. They also face higher rates of unemployment and public assistance, and their own children are more likely to need foster care services. Add to that, 1 in 4 former foster youth end up in prison within 2 years of leaving the system. In a nutshell, the American foster care system effectively plays its role in perpetuating economic and racial inequality and cycles of trauma. What happened to Bryant should be a cautionary tale for Black parents about the horrible outcomes that can happen to youth who have the misfortune of being placed. I had multiple placements and did not develop close bonds with my numerous white and Black foster parents, whom I believe looked after kids like me and Ma'Khia Bryant for a paycheck. I was also placed in youth shelters and a group home for abused teens where I was often bullied by other older girls. I was angry all the time. I felt unheard. I often couldn't reach my social worker when I had problems in my placement. They were too busy with case overloads. In some of my placements, things were locked up. The refrigerator, food pantry, and windows, and bedroom doors had alarms on them. I felt like I was in prison. There were all these rules about how kids and staff were not allowed to hug or touch us. All the shrinks were forced to see, all the shrinks we were forced to see were white and had a hard time connecting with us and felt they did not understand us. The staff were always walking around with log books and clipboards, jotting down observation notes about us. I witnessed kids who ran away from their placement to go back home often get arrested and brutalized by cops when they were returned. It was often hard to distinguish whether we were victims in protective care or if we were juveniles being treated like delinquents in some of these settings. When I moved from one placement to the next, my belongings were packed in garbage bags. The intake staff wore gloves to take inventory of my stuff, making me feel like I was dirty or contagious. Holidays and birthdays were not special times. I felt ashamed to be a foster kid, ashamed to be an adoptee, ashamed that I had to walk around with extension cord marks on my face, ashamed that I didn't live in a normal family that loved and protected me, ashamed that I felt abandoned by my Black family and community that left me to navigate a gauntlet of white state agents. I never felt like I was part of my foster family, any of them. I felt like a refugee, always the outsider, and I knew that a placement could abruptly end at any time. If the foster parents had biological children of their own, there was a huge difference in how I was treated versus their own. I've heard stories among Black foster youth about being whooped by their foster parents, even though state agencies don't allow this kind of punishment. Black folks often chuckle at that scene in Tyler Perry's Diary of a Mad Black Woman, where Medea beats her foster child, played by Keke Palmer, for being disrespectful. But the reality is that so many traumatized Black children are placed in foster homes that are unsafe and re-traumatizing. I had a Black foster mother who was a Jehovah's Witness that got upset with me for refusing to knock on doors on Saturdays. One of her drunk relatives cussed me out and threatened to knock my head off. I had at least 2 violent incidents when I was 14. I was slapped by a 17-year-old boy while playing basketball. I had thrown the ball at him because he kept groping me. His slap was followed by me busting him in the head with a metal footstool. In another incident, an older girl who bullied me for weeks found herself on the receiving end of me beating her with my spiked track shoes when she barged into my room to fight. At that time, I didn't give one thought to the fact that I could have seriously injured or killed one of those kids who had their own pent-up traumas, grief, losses, and anger. My body and brain didn't work that way. Nobody was teaching us how to heal, how to manage our bodies and emotions. I was always danger mapping and living in survival mode all the time. So I wonder about Bryant's journey to foster care. Has she already suffered her share of physical or sexual abuse? Was she grieving the loss of family, friends, privacy? How was she treated by her foster mother and her relatives before the days leading up to her death? Did she feel voiceless? Was she always danger mapping? It is important for us to speak about Bryant as a developing person growing up in a racist society that kills Black children slowly. Because Black folks, much like white folks, like to adultify Black children with unreasonable expectations for their behaviors. This child likely had an accumulation of stress in her body, ancestral and genetic stress that affected her birth mother while she was pregnant. Stress from poverty, perhaps. Stress from living in a food desert and around eco hazards, maybe. And the stress of navigating the foster care system. Add to that, she was likely suffering from disruption in brain development caused by complex trauma, which likely impacted the way she expressed emotions and responded to the people in her environment. And this child was a straight A student given all of this. If she was living in a hostile foster home, her body was likely in a constant state of hyperarousal. Everything was a danger to her. I wonder how many times she had picked up a knife before that fateful day. What I saw in that video footage was a young girl in fight or flight mode, in survival mode. That rush of dopamine in her body was overriding any logic and reasoning in that moment. That's why she likely didn't stay in that unsafe house. That's why she didn't drop the knife when the police arrived. You can't subject children to toxic stress and abuse and expect their young brains to make good judgment calls. You can't expect them to know how to manage their bodies and to discharge the stress pent up in their nervous system. You can't expect them to have the cognition of full-grown adults. Let's be real. Had Ma'Khia Bryant not been in the foster care system in the first place, we'd likely not be having this conversation. A police officer's bullets killed her, but anybody who played a role in shaping her brain and subjecting her to degrading experiences is culpable. We can rightly blame systemic racism and trigger-happy cops, but Black folks must also begin to have some hard conversations about how we can stop priming our children to fall victim to these systemic traps in this racist, spiritually dead culture that requires the blood of our children to perpetuate itself. We can't change white people. We can't reform this system. We've been at this death game for centuries with them, but our energy should be focused on helping our children survive this gauntlet of oppression so that they don't have to pick up butter knives to defend themselves like Ma'Khia Bryant had to do. Stacey Patton, PhD, is the author of Spare the Kids, Why Whipping Children Won't Save Black America, and the forthcoming book, Strung Up, The Lynching of Black Children in Jim Crow America. Let me share this in the chat. Well, I'm going to just share the article because I can't seem to copy and paste. I'm reaching out to the sister to find out how I can help. I hope you do the same. Hi, Sandra Del Reed 360. Welcome to the live, my love. I'm going to read these, and I'm going to pick this up tomorrow with the rest of the articles I had to share. I'll roll it over to tomorrow's anti-Black racism segment, okay? Let's see here. Brian says, yes, the system certainly failed her, and she naturally fell into the trap of government-sanctioned murder. Absolutely, Brian. And with that said, family, let me put a prayer of protection over us. That was a lot. But I hope you feel compelled to do something about it. I pasted the article there. I'm going to reach out to the PhD sister and purchase her books and find out how can I help. Our children clearly need us. And they need us to also fight on this affront, to end the violence against our children. This is our future. And we must get involved. And with that said, I want to share with you, I want to thank you, first of all, for joining the live. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. I'm being shadow banned. I've been totally disabled from Facebook for doing shows like this. So I need your help getting the word out and getting, what do they call those things? Just give a thumbs up. I can't even think right now. I'm so exhausted from that article. That took a lot out of me. I just went to look it up to juxtapose it to what I was sharing about how they're trying to get federal investigations on the Columbus Police Department, which is definitely necessary. I feel it's necessary every time an unarmed Black man, woman, or child is executed by the race soldiers. They need federal investigations. But anywho, with that said, that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever ADOX and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God, the voice of God, the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Until tomorrow noon for your midday wake-up call, you make it a beautiful God-inspired rest of your evening. Know that I love you Black, and I love you strong, family. Peace.